Hello, everyone. My name is Melania, and welcome back to another episode of Learn STEM. If you're currently listening on Spotify, make sure to click so that you're able to see the video because there are visuals. And if you're on YouTube, welcome. Any other platform, it's perfectly fine to just listen to the audio recording, but visuals are highly encouraged. Anyways, today we will be going over the biosphere, and this will cover ecology, weather, it'll cover the global circulation, and the major terrestrial and aquatic biomes. In the top left corner, I have a QR code that will take you to our Spotify page, and we would really appreciate if you were able to give us a 5-star review on Spotify just to support us. So, without further ado, let's just get started. So, first off, we have ecology, and ecology is the study of organisms and their environment and kind of the relationships that they have with abiotic factors or non living things. And we're trying to study and see why or how the abundance and the distribution of the organisms correlates to this. So, first off, yeah, we have just standard ecology. But if you delve a little bit deeper, there's more things to it. So first off is global ecology, and you can study at this level because there's certain levels to ecology. Global ecology is studying the biosphere, and the biosphere is all the ecosystems in the entire world together. Then there is landscape ecology, which is kind of a mosaic of connected ecosystems together that you can study in their relationships. Then we have then we have ecosystem ecology, and ecosystem ecology is the study of one ecosystem, so all of the community or all living things in a given area plus the abiotic or non-living things. You can also study community ecology, which is multiple populations and multiple species interacting with each other. You can study population ecology. Population ecology is, again, a population, which means it's a group of interbreeding organisms within the same species within a given area. And then lastly is organisms or organismal ecology, and that is the study of a single particular individual and their relationship. So ecology is huge, and yeah, there's tons of different strands that you can go into and different levels that you can study. All right, so next is weather, and one thing about weather is the climate, and the climate is the long-term prevailing weather conditions, and this can be determined by winds, sunlight, precipitation, and even temperature. So weather is it's broader than just, or I'm sorry, climate is broader than just what the weather is at a current moment. Climate is long-term patterns like throughout the year, and it's generalizations that you can make based off of a particular region. So there's macro and there's microclimates. Macroclimates are larger climate patterns, and this can be from a globe, a region, or a particular area. And then microclimates are kind of like this little tree right here. You can say that this tree is a whole climate for a particular group of animals or individuals. In addition, maybe under a rock is a certain climate for beetles. So climate definitely varies. So the plate tectonics is a super important thing that you're going to need to know. So I have these two little animations that kind of show the plate tectonics, and those are just movements. You can see the two plate tectonics are spreading and a volcano is occurring, and when they're shifting one up and down, you can see an earthquake happening. So long ago we had Pangea, and that was a single continent or a single body of land on Earth. And because of this, we had cold, dry climate inland because they were nowhere near the ocean or the or any body of water, in fact. And we had deep ocean basins and very little shallow areas of water due to just like having everything concentrated. But because of shifting plates, which is like things that happen on the very left, we have variations in climate, and climate can even change based off of moving north or south. It can also lead to allopatric speciation, which is speciation occurring due to a geographical difference or barrier. So for global circulation, there's a North Pole and a South Pole, right? North is on top, South is on the bottom. Sounds pretty simple, but we have to go over how the wind and the air and the climate can actually, you know, just because of this tilt that Earth has and because of the spin it has, how does this affect the weather? So with our poles that we've established, and you look in the middle between them, and at the very middle is the equator, and that is that really long line, right? Starting from the equator, we have 0 degrees. When you go up one, it's 30 degrees. And when you go down one, it's also 30 degrees. And when you go up a little bit more, it's 60, and down the same. And our poles are 90 degrees. So latitude, these are our areas. There's 0 degrees, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 90 degrees. And you can kind of think of that like a triangle. So this is important for global air circulation because um, we use these to kind of tell us where and how weather is being affected. And it kind of gives us a base, or establishes a base for us to look at this and make generalizations. So with Earth being round, the sun doesn't strike everything at the exact same radiation and amounts as it, or force really, as it would if it was a flat object. So you can see near the equator, because it's like closest to the sun, it has sunlight striking at it most directly, and it's very concentrated there, while the lower angle, and the lower angles of the sunlight coming in at like the 30 to 90 degree areas on the bottom and the top, it takes farther for the sun to have to go and strike the earth, and there's a larger surface area it needs to cover. So this kind of hints at why the equator is a lot warmer than like the northern and southern poles. So there is a principle, and because the equator is warm because of the sunlight, right? It's generating low pressure. And you can kind of think of it like atoms, because they're super hot, they're just jittering around super, super fast, and they're not all condensed together. So that's why we have low pressure in the middle, and we have high pressures in the colder polar areas. With warm air, we know warm air rises. So that's why if you look at the Hadley cells, starting from the equator, the warm air rises and it begins to cool off, but as it rises, it's actually going to allow rain to fall. So with this, in the 0 degree area, you're going to get lots of rain generally. But after the warm air rises, it begins to cool, and that's where it moves towards this 30-degree latitudes. And the air, because it's colder now, it sinks. And then as it sinks, it goes back towards the beginning of the Hadley cell, towards the 0 degrees, and this is our prevailing winds. So at the 30 degrees, you're typically going to have no precipitation, because the precipitation all came out when the warm air was rising, and so you're going to get deserts. And this continues at the 60-degree line. So at the 60-degree line, you have the Ferrel cell, which extends and goes up to the polar cell. So you have the Hadley, Ferrel, and polar cells, and this cycle of warm air rising and cold air sinking continues. Now, if you look at this, there's these little wind patterns inside, not around the globe depicted, but actually on the inside. And this is because of the Coriolis effect. So let's go over the Coriolis effect. Basically, because the Earth is a sphere, if you look at the launch site from here, just straight down, the target of the wind, since the Earth is turning, it's going to have the exact same target site, but with the rotation, it actually pushes and moves a little. So there's like there's a path of rotation that occurs, and that's why our target it's actually missed. So because of this, that's where we get our trailing winds. And so with our trailing winds, there's some important things to know. And the first thing to know is that in the northern hemisphere, the wind always trails right, and in the southern hemisphere, it always trails left. Now, why in the north then are those blue lines going to the right? Well, I'm sorry, why in the world are these red lines going to the left in the northern hemisphere when it should be going to the right for those top red lines labeled trade winds? Well, that's because if you look at the equator, if you look at the southern trade wind, that is going left like it should, right? But when we're in the northern, it's actually going to go left from this point of view because the point of view that you're supposed to be looking at is from the top. So if you look from the polar easterly and you face down towards the equator, that is the right that they're talking about. And from there, then you can see that the other winds facing forward or to the right. So hopefully that made sense, but that's why the winds are different. And so this is a great example that I was able to find, and it's basically showing that the different trade winds. So there's the trade winds, which are the inner ones, the northeast trade winds and the southern east. Then we have the westerlies, which are the middle, and then we have the easterlies, which are the outer winds. And it also does a good job of showing all the Hadley cells. So if you want to take a screenshot, this is a really good photo I found. Another cool thing is that because of these global circulations that we've created or established, you can kind of predict or generalize climate. So at 90 degrees or the poles latitude, cold air is sinking, right? So no precipitation would be there because all the warm air had the precipitation, and no plants are grown. At 60 degrees latitude, we have warm and cold air kind of meeting. And this is because the two cells, the Hadley and the Farrell cells, are coming together. And so warm and cold air are meeting, and there's precipitation. However, it's not too warm, and you can kind of think of this as like moderate weather. At 30 degrees latitude, we have dry air, but no precipitation. So those are our deserts, and remember, that's the first Hadley cell. That's where the air drops off. And then at 0 degrees latitude or the equator, warm air and lots of rain or your rainforests. So on our picture on the left shows how it starts at a tundra on the extremes. Then it goes to forests in the 60, and you can remember that again because of the Farrell and the Hadley cells meeting. So it's pretty just moderate or mild and mixed. Then we have 30 degrees, which are our deserts. And then in between our deserts and our tropical rainforests are grasslands. So you're just going to have to remember that. The grasslands are always in between. And you can kind of think of it because rainforests have lots of diversity. And same with grasslands and tropical forests that are dry. But they're in between deserts, so they're still kind of warm or dry. So now we have biomes, and biomes are very fun. So I found this cool video on the major biomes, but for copyright reasons, I'm obviously not going to play it. So if you want to see this video, this is a very good one. It's called List Major Biomes. So first off, we have the tropical biomes. Or actually, first let me go over some terrestrial generalizations. So terrestrial biomes. They typically grade into each other, and there's a lack of like major geographical barriers in between terrestrial biomes. It really just has to do with the global air circulation. An ecotone is an area between two or more biomes, and there's a lot of biomes that have something called vertical layering that aquatic biomes don't have, and these are like trees and canopies on rainforests. They're layers, literally layers, where different animals can live, and this creates literally vertical biomes almost. And so because there's a lack of like geographic variation and there's tons of different biomes, we have kind of convergent evolution happening where despite animals not being or organisms not being like related closely because they're living in the same biomes, for example, deserts are everywhere except for one continent, they can like convergently evolve. And so another thing is disturbance, and disturbance is any like natural disaster or artificially like human created event that causes a shift in a community. And we'll be going over some ways that there's been disturbances in different biomes. But now back to where we are. Here is the tropical forest. So there's tropical rainforest and tropical dry forests, but they're both around the equator. Tropical rainforests, hence the name, have rain all year, while tropical dry forests, they do have a lot of rain. Don't get me wrong, but they only have a lot of rain seasonally. Um, there's little season variation between the two, so they're all going to be kind of hot all year. Think of the sun. And there's high temperatures again because they're near the equator. Another interesting thing is they are vertically layered, so there's a huge light competition going on in tropical rainforests, and so animals in the canopy try to challenge each other for light, and so do plants. That's why a lot of trees are huge and they're trying to outgrow each other in the rainforest. And rainforests are super diverse. There's millions of species estimated of bugs that we have not even discovered in tropical rainforests. However, tropical rainforests are being destroyed, so that is one way of disturbance. Okay, next we have deserts. Deserts are at that 30-degree north and south latitude. And deserts don't necessarily have to be hot, okay? There's hot and there's cold deserts. But they're typically found on the interior of continents. And remember Pangea, how the interior of the continents were generally cold and dry, kind of like a desert. This is because there's a lack of, any water. So that's easy to remember. But yeah, they're in the interior of continents, and there's varying precipitation that's always low, but you never really know when you're going to get water next. And so, because of that, organisms have specialized and through natural selection have been able to hold water and specialize in obtaining and keeping water whenever they find it. Then we have a savanna, and savannas are around the equator. And remember, they're kind of in between a desert and a rainforest. So savannas are near or around the equator, and they have hotter temperatures, but there's more variance in seasons compared to um, tropical rainforests. I like to think of it how wherever the latitude line is, so 0, 30, 60, there's not really like variance, while like in between there is. So grass makes up the ground cover of savannas, and there are seasonal droughts and fires that humans have made to actually help the biome because of how um, many droughts there are. It's super dry there, so plant species have adapted and been able to tolerate the little water there. A chaparral is around the 30 to 60 degrees, like it's somewhere in between there. And it's in the coastal regions, and there's variance in precipitation, but it's also pretty good precipitation. So that's why it's kind of like a desert, but with plants. That's what I like to think of it with. So it's really hot summers, cool winters, and it's dominated by shrubs, small trees, fires that are trees, and they're all adapted to fires and droughts. Then we have the temperate grasslands, and the temperate grasslands are basically, I like to think of them as like where bison are, like farms. There are a lot of them are converted to farmland, and there's grass all over, hence the name grassland. But these aren't tall grasses like savannas. There's cold and dry, wet winters, yet hot and wet summers. That's why there's a lot of variance and kind of like farming season, all that. So these are mid latitude. They're kind of just in the middle of different. They're in between like 30 to 60, 60 to 90s. And there's also highly seasonal precipitation, so lots of precipitation during specific seasons. Next is our northern coniferous forests, and these are also known as taigas. And taigas are found in North America and Eurasia, and they're the largest biome on the earth. So precipitation varies here, but they do have super cold and pretty hot winters or summers. Super cold winters though, and because of this, conifers dominate the area. So conifer plants, there's not like precipitation that it's just like it's not stable. So the conifers are able to reduce the surface area of their leaves by using small, thin needle leaves. And also, migratory animals are here because of the super cold winters, super hot summers, too variable. It's just too diverse for them. Then we have our temperate broadleaf forests, and temperate broadleaf forests are mid-latitude but in the northern hemisphere, and there's significant rainfall and snow during these seasons. They're cold and they're hot winters. They're kind of just like in the United States area, like on the East Coast. This is where temperate broadleaf forests are, and they are vertically layered, just like tropical rainforests. Deciduous trees, or trees that have broad leaves, hence the name, fall off seasonally, and a lot of animals hibernate here. And then lastly, we have the tundra, and the tundra is composed of high mountaintops and Arctic. They're on the Arctic poles. So all latitudes have tundras, because on the high mountaintops, we call those alpine tundras. So alpine tundras occur literally on all latitudes, just because of how cold it gets the higher you go. And so there's low precipitation in uh, the Arctic regions, but there's high precipitation in the alpine tundras, so with the mountains. But one thing that they all have is cold winters and cool summers, and permafrost, which is frozen soil, and that prevents any animals, or any plants, any plants to actually grow, because the water is not able to infiltrate. And there's herbaceous vegetation, though, like just mosses, trees, lichen, but as you can see, it's pretty rare. So I'm just going to go back to this slide, because I feel like this is a good time to just go back real quick. This kind of makes sense now if you look. So let's just start at tropical rainforest. In the middle, we have at 0 degrees latitude, and that is lots of hot air and very, very wet, right? And then that warm air is going to rise, let the rain fall, and then become cooler. So that's why you have your dry tropical forests in your savanna grasslands, because although they're hot, they're a little bit cooler than tropical rainforests, and they vary a little bit more. Then the dry air falls and it's cold, and so this dry air at 30 degrees latitude creates your deserts. And again, this mixing happens at the spheral cell and the Hadley cell, and so your warm air rises, and you're going to have right above deserts your deciduous forests and your temperate grasslands. So first off, you had your rainforests and your savannas. Now you have your temperate grasslands and your deciduous forests. And I kind of think of that as like, that's like the United States area, farms and forests. And then getting higher, of course, you have your taiga, or your coniferous forests in like the Canada area. And lastly, you have your tundra. So that's kind of how I'd like to think of it. Anyways, now let's go to aquatic biomes. So aquatic biomes have less latitude variation than terrestrial biomes, but they do have some kind of latitude variation, like thermocline. Thermocline is basically the different layers established, or you can kind of establish seasonal layers within a body of water due to the temperature of the water. But again, there's no geographical variation that much as compared to terrestrial biomes. Is more temperature. And then there's salt concentrations that completely vary. Like ocean water has 3% salt, while like a lake might have 0.5. So here are the zones, or the major zones. We have the intertidal zone that occurs up at this very top, and the intertidal zone is it's pretty, like, basically we'll go over it, but it's closest to the shore, and it's where there's a high tide and a low tide, and so it's a mix between land and water, and animals that are organisms that live there have to be able to adapt to, like, sometimes there's gonna be air, sometimes there's not, sometimes there's gonna be water, sometimes there isn't. Then we have the photic zone and the aphotic zone. So photic means light, and the photic zone is just made up of all areas where there's like photosynthesis is able to occur, because light is still able to pass through the water. And the aphotic zone is where it's kind of below 200 meters, where like no photosynthesis can occur. Then we have at the very bottom, we have the benthic zone, and this is the very bottom of the sea that is made up of sediments, of organic material, soot, and this is the ocean floor, and it is very nutrient rich. So at some point there will be turnovers where the nutrients will rise up, and the oxygenated water at the top will fall and kind of clean or cleanse the ocean, if you want to say. Then we have the neritic zone, and this zone is like around the continental shelf. I like to think of it as like where the sharks are. It's not really deep, and there's lots of nutrients and sunlights for a lot of animals. It's kind of where we go swimming for the ocean and where we go waterboarding and stuff, because the continental shelf is, although we think it's deep, it's not as deep as the benthic zone. I would not want to go down there. I'd be very, very scared. So yeah, the neritic zone is where humans like to enjoy their day. And then the oceanic zone is out past the continental shelf, and that is where there's less nutrients and fewer organisms live. One thing they didn't also say is the abyssal zone, but this is part of the continental shelf, and it has long, long depths. Okay, so first off, we have lakes, and lakes vary in sizes. You probably have a lake in your backyard, or you've seen a lake somewhere near you. And then there's also the Great Lakes. So Great Lakes are literally like oceans, they're huge. So there's a huge size variation. Then we have two different types of lakes. There's oligotrophic lakes, which are nutrient poor, but they're heavy in oxygen. And there's eutrophic lakes, which are the opposite. So they're heavy in nutrients, but they kind of lack oxygen, especially if ice is covering them during the winter time. And so that's why tidal turnover should occur. But to kind of mix these together. But anyways, eutrophic lakes, they're going to have more surface area to depth ratio compared to oligotrophic lakes. And this is because like oligotrophic lakes, because they're so just long, they're not going to be able to mix as nicely as eutrophic lakes. And there's a littoral zone or a littoral zone, and this is where aquatic plants are able to live, and it's shallow because it's well lighted. So like it's shallow and it's well lighted, so all these plants are able to live there, while the limnetic zone is deeper water, and not as many plants are able to live there, and not much life either. So again, the littoral zone has shallow, lots of light, and the limnetic zone is really deep. So then there is wetlands, and wetlands have a lot of organic production and low oxygen. So yeah, wetlands are kind of just this mix of land and water, and you can tell that it's very nutrient rich, but yeah, low oxygen. Then there's streamlands, or streams and rivers. I don't know why I said streamlands. So streams and rivers, and currents currents vary, and that's kind of what gives you what. So upstream, if you're going upstream, you have a cold and rocky environments, while if you're going downstream, it's warm and silky. And I, again, try to think of it as like cold, you're going up towards the pole, or the North Pole at least, like in like Canada and stuff. So you're going to have rocky and cold, while warm, you're going towards the equator, and it's going to be like the beach. Then we have estuaries, and estuaries are a mix between the river and sea, and they're super nutrient rich, and things like algae live in them. The intertidal zone is a zone between land and ocean, and again, you're periodically underwater and above based on the tides, and there's variations in salinity, temperature, and waves, especially the forces there. But it is high in oxygen and nutrients, so the animals there have to adapt very well. Then we have the ocean, we have the pelagic and the benthic zones. So the benthic zone, again, was that bottom. It was the seafloor below the surface of the neritic zone, or the area where the coastal humans like kind of go and swim, right? So it's below the surface waters of that, and there's cold and high water pressure there because it's so deep. While the pelagic zone, if you look here, it's kind of just in the middle, and this is wind-driven ocean currents, and there's lots of oxygen, and it's huge. It's literally just huge. Then there's the coral reefs, and the coral reefs are calcium carbonate skeletons of corals. So they were once living, and it's warm, clear water is what they prefer because that's what the calcium is able to work best in. And there's super high oxygen concentrations there, and they're really, really diverse. So, thank you for watching, and let me go back to the very beginning so that you can once again use that QR code and rate us 5 stars if you thought that this was interesting or it really helped. So, thank you so much, guys, for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.